So you talked about you suggest to diverge from the cross. I think the people follow the cross for reasons because it's safer, it's less risky. So what's your take on this point? If you want to be non-y, take more to be diverse, but probably be more risky.
So how to think through this idea of how diversified you should be to control risk?
Yeah, versus taking a risk, right? This is like a trade-off there.
I think you've focused on really one of the most important questions. And one of the things that was fascinating to me in terms of interviewing an array of these different great investors was actually to see the difference in the way that they had solved this question. So Monish, for example, had most of his money in about 5 stocks and had tremendous confidence, tremendous knowledge of these stocks. But then one of them blew up. And so it's risky. I mean, there's I think it's one reason why Monish will outperform massively over the years, but I think it can be like that. And so for Monish, because he has this extraordinary temperament, it's feasible. So I said to Monish about the financial crisis, I said, how did you deal with the stress of the financial crisis? Because at one point his hedge fund was massively down. And he said, I don't feel stress. And I actually don't think that's true. I think it may have been true then, but I think there are circumstances where even for Monish or even for like Bill Miller, these guys who are very unemotional, you can get to a situation where a sufficient number of things go wrong that actually it becomes very painful. And so I think even for people like Monish, who have an extraordinary temperament, you have to be aware of the dangers of overconfidence. And I talked to people like Joel Greenblatt about this, and Joel had 80%. Joel is one of the greatest hedge fund managers of all time, and Joel had 80% of his money in 6 to 8 stocks for much of his career, and he said, every few weeks the portfolio might go down, 30% in a couple of weeks, and he said it was fine for him. He could cope with it, but he said he actually returned a lot of the shareholders' money. After 5 years, he returned half the money, and after 10 years, he returned all of the money. So the only shareholders were him and his family and his partners. And he said if the family lost money or friends lost money, he would help them out, and so it was okay. So I think the point is, you kind of have to look at your own temperament and say, how unemotional am I? And one of the things my friend Guy Spear was saying to me recently is you can actually get to a point where you're emotionally flooded, where you can actually reach a point where a sufficient number of things go wrong at the same time that it's very hard to be rational, to make rational decisions. And his view is that you want to try always to be the last man standing. And he said you look at Buffett, who has 10 times more capital in his insurance business than anyone else. He's basically set it up so he's anti-fragile, so he'll survive whatever goes wrong. And so Guy's view is you want to kind of look at what everyone else is doing, what the people you do, what the people you really admire, where they are on the risk curve, and then he said just do less than them. And I think it's a really interesting idea that you kind of, if you're super concentrated, if you're incredibly smart, you can get unbelievable returns. But I think for most of us, if you want to survive over not one cycle, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years as an investor, I think diversification and just saying, what do I know? What if it goes wrong? What if I'm wrong? There's a French investor I interviewed, a guy called François-Marie Wojcik, who said to me, I have 3 principles: doubt, doubt, and doubt. And I think it's kind of helpful to doubt yourself. And I think diversification, it's just kind of rational to say, yeah, but if this company I own, if I'm wrong, what are the consequences? And one of the things Irving Kahn said to me that I thought was really interesting. He said the single most important piece of financial advice I can share is to focus on the downside. And he said, the trouble these days, he said, people can gallop really fast, but he said they don't really know what direction they're galloping in. And he said, if you really focus on the downside, and he said you have reasonable returns and you avoid terrible losses, he said you'll outperform all of your gambler friends. And he said it's also a good cure for your sleeping